Before moving out here to Traverse City, one of the last things I did back in New England was pay a visit to Walden Pond out in Concord. Walden is a place that is special and dear to my heart, as well as to many other writers, transcendentalists, and thinkers, possibly even to some of you who have had the chance to go visit. And in fact, it's even my photo that I shared for our slideshow this morning. In my first year of divinity school, some classmates and I made what we called a pilgrimage out to Walden, especially for us Unitarian Universalists who had never been there before. In peak fall, with the turning colors of the leaves, I remember looking out over Walden's glossy surface, seeing the reflection of clouds overhead across the water, as well as the deep shades of blue and green. Right before moving here, my housemates and I did a final summer plunge into the waters, getting the cool rush of relief from the humid 90-degree Boston weather. Over the course of the past 3 years, Walden became an increasingly spiritual place for me. It was a place where I could lose myself in its depths, walking around the rim in just over an hour, helping me to think and just be present for a moment, especially in those harder moments. It was a special place that I had seen through many different seasons, walking across the solid frozen over surface in winter, a couple inches of thick ice covering its surface, including even people who were fishing just underneath the surface of the ice. It very much reminds me of Emerson's poem on water that Andy shared in her welcome, how the water understands civilization well. It is not disconcerted, it is not brokenhearted. Well used, it decketh joy. Ill used, it will destroy. The waters of Walden, no doubt frozen, thawed, and refrozen year after year, bring with them a lighthearted aspect, just as they also bring a subtle sense of destruction. The ice carving and splitting large stones and boulders along the water's edge with each passing year. When I think about special places of water that hold memories, I remember Walden and the visits my friends and I used to make, each time finding something new or interesting that we quite hadn't seen the same way before. Walden is especially a testament to the power of memory and how water itself can also be a source of remembrance. As I travel the water's edge, I'd think about the generations of people who had been there before, the other countless groups of Harvard students and Concord intellectuals who had also traveled right where I stood, as well as the indigenous peoples, the Massachusetts and Nipmuc people who had stewarded these waters for generations before. The years of family memories and experiences of parents and children lounging on the beach and jumping in and out of the cool waters. How the area itself has borne witness to so much transformation and change over all these years. And yet, somehow the memories endure. And each and every day, new memories are created on its shores as people swim, walk, canoe, and otherwise experience its magnificence and beauty. How each person creates a sort of relationship to this pond, one that they find hard to capture fully in words, let alone photographs. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking at this point. Yeah, we get it. It's a special pond, and of course it's beautiful. I am definitely not the first to speak about Walden's enchanting waters, and neither the first to find a power deeply moving there. For whatever reason, photos just can't capture the beauty found when you're there taking it all in person. This morning, we celebrate our annual water communion, a tradition that we share across Unitarian Universalist congregations in September to mark the beginning of another congregational year and are joining back together again after months of being apart. This is also the second year that we've celebrated a rather atypical communion of our waters, where we've invited you to send in and share with us photos of your special places and memories, rather than bringing in bottles and glasses and vials and containers of water. Now, after a whopping 76 photos that you all sent in, I can tell you that there is a richness here of special memories and moments at these places that just seem to capture our minds and hearts. And likewise, I'm finding the same might also be true for you. Photos can only do so much in sharing in the abundance of beauty found in each of these sacred and special places. And even so, how wonderful it is to participate in this sacred ritual again year after year, even when we can't be physically together to do it. While we aren't together physically this morning, there is still a living connection and memory in this congregation, found in sharing our waters year after year, a memory that we still draw on even now. As many streams flow also into one large collective source, our many memories also flow through the channels of our lives, including the generations of waters past. So this morning, in the spirit of our water communion, as well as with this month's Soul Matters theme of embracing possibility, I thought I'd share with you some reflections on the sacredness of water, especially the possibility with how water itself is actually a site of living relationship and memory. Water itself has been a source of mystery, sacredness, and wonder for human beings across cultures. There are numerous sites of sacredness and observance, honoring water's preciousness and its living memory across the country and our world. We need look no further than our own Grand Traverse Bay itself, as well as the greater Lake Michigan, a site sacred to many of you, as well as to our Anishinaabeg ancestors, the indigenous people in our area. The sixth largest lake in the world, Lake Michigan, is known to have been crossed over, fished in, and stewarded for generations by the Anishinaabeg. Speaking to memory itself, the people knew the area so well that they could easily navigate the waters without maps, unlike early Europeans who traversed the area. The people who called the lake Michigami in the Anishinaabe-Moan language knew as well the hazards and dangers that came up on the lake, including heavy storms, winds, and rain. Though the Anishinaabe have faced the challenges of violence, colonization, and ongoing erasure, their descendants, the Ojibwe and Odawa peoples, as well as their sacred memories, endure of this incredibly special place. And we too are also lucky to share in this place's memory and beauty, even when we also work to remember the harder memories of our history, the currents of which still flow through our lives today. Betsy spoke to the powerful living memory of water for many indigenous tribes, as well as the Anishinaabe, within our Time for All Ages this morning, especially the importance of water as more than just something to be used as a resource or something for utility. From the Anishinaabe chiefs of Ontario, they share that water is a living being with its own spirit. Water is life and is sacred and respected as a relative. Water is part of a greater interconnected whole, and water is not about use, but rather about proper relationships. Because water is recognized as a living spiritual force, one's relationship with water should also be based on respect. Water, in this sense, is knowledge, as the authors describe it. It is a living ancestor with its own life, force, and spirit, and it is connected to all things. And because of its sacredness, our relationships to it demand respect. In terms of science, we also see how water itself is living out a sense of sacred memory and relationship. Those of you who learned about the water cycle growing up remember the countless ways that water is stored up into springs, lakes, oceans, and puddles, how the molecules soak up the energy and heat and evaporate and gather high up in the atmosphere. Soon they then form into wisps and clouds, sometimes into frozen little droplets, all to fall back down to earth from heavy clouds with rain and snow. Even on an atomic level, water remembers and is in relationship to all things. And we can detect trace amounts of elements and minerals all throughout water, as well as pollutants and contaminants, pieces of water's unknown flowing, evaporating, and condensing past. Though we can't trace where each molecule of water has been, we know that its journey has been a long one. We know that these very atoms are ones that have floated across oceans, as well as have been locked up in ice sheets and glaciers at some point. Each molecule of water found in any source could very well have come from across the world, traveling in its winding path through nature's sacred and enduring rhythms. Yes, water is both knowledge and also relative, just as it is also the practical source of life, the abundant liquid found covering most of our lovely earth. Water is not to be taken for granted, though we also hope that it will continue to flow freely in abundance for ourselves and for our future generations. It is a relationship that we too share in, just as we share in this relationship with one another. A relationship that we affirm each time we gather our separate waters into one common fount of blessing. Or in this case, one common album of images, memories, and experiences. I wonder, if we could ask water itself about its memories, like we might ask a grandparent or a wise friend, what would it tell us? What wild, epic tales of adventure would it have to share? What calm, gentle perspectives on life and all that it supports on this earth would it offer? What could we learn from listening to such a beautiful voice, one that tells us of new relationships we might have to our planet and to the ecosystem? What can we learn from growing in relationship to this wise relative of ours found across all things? It's clear that we still have much to learn, especially around preserving and protecting sacred sources of water. We also have much to do in the way of building lasting, enduring relationships with water, beyond just what we can use or take from it. So many of you have shared your sacred and special places that you shared in our slideshow, which we will see in just a moment. Renee did an absolutely incredible job putting this together. And just as we affirm our relationships to one another in our beloved UUCGT community, I also invite you to affirm your relationship to this sacred water that you've shared, to all those sacred sources of water and places of mystery and wonder within our lives. And for those of you who didn't send a photo in or simply just forgot, I invite you to hold on your heart and your mind's eye an image, place, or memory of water. Join with me in this brief moment. Imagine the journey that this water has taken to this day and moment, as well as the journey still far ahead of it. Having virtually gathered our shared waters, we too recognize them as sacred and blessed. We know that the water remembers just as its own life is bound all across the earth. Our lives are bound to it too, into one shared combined destiny. And as we recognize that these waters are blessed, may we hold also their history of the many peoples and generations that cared for them and stewarded them before us, of those whose lives and memories that continue through them. May we always remember the water, just as surely the water remembers. May it be so, and amen.